Hi again, everybody. Welcome back to Battlestar Galactica Remembered, the show where we're taking a look at all things Battlestar Galactica original 1978 version. And recently, I did a series of profiles of videos about the leading ladies of Battlestar Galactica. You know, Serena, Athena, Cassiopeia, and Sheba. If you haven't seen any of those, I invite you to take a look at those. Please also subscribe and like the channel if you'd like to talk about Battlestar Galactica, our favorite show, right? So anyway, keep the great comments coming too, by the way. It's nice that, we can remember this awesome show. Well, anyway, after I did that series of leading ladies, you realize that there are a lot of other ladies on the show, from guest stars to even background characters. And so somebody made a comment, and I've been thinking about this, and I decided what we're going to do for today's show, something a little different. We are going to profile 5 of the background characters in Battlestar Galactica that are pretty famous. You may not know their names, but they're pretty famous. Why is that? Because they are 5 of the female Colonial Warrior Viper pilots, that's right, who were trained to be Viper pilots, in the episode Lost Planet of the Gods. You know, the G-suit locker room scene, that famous thing, yes. So we're going to take a look at these now. There were more than 5 ladies in that scene, but about 4 or 5 of them are not even credited. Okay, we do not know who they are. But along with Athena and Serena, there are 5 other ladies, actresses who actually were credited. If you look at the very end in the credits, they are labeled like first, second, third girl warrior, and even one of them, believe it or not, has a name. That's right. Although I don't think it's ever mentioned in the episode. But there's not a lot of photos of them. But when I do put the photo up of each of them, you'll probably recognize them. But the thing, one thing about them is, even though they are credited, they do not have any speaking lines. They are just background characters. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to them right now. And the first one is this young lady here. You can recognize her by the pictures of her in the cockpit and so forth. She probably has the best of all the different photos. And this is Janet Lynn Curtis. Now, Janet Lynn Curtis, she was a contracted player with Universal between 1977 to 1980. And she had come out in a few other shows and this and that at the time. And she came out in this role on Battlestar Galactica, Lost Planet of the Gods. Interesting thing about Janet Lynn Curtis, however, is that she was the only one. If you look at the credits at the end of part 1 of Lost Planet of the Gods, she is actually given a name. That's right. She comes out as Sorrell, Sorrell. So she actually has a name, although I don't think, again, it's ever mentioned on the show, on screen. But that's kind of interesting. Anyway, well, after Battlestar Galactica, what does Janet Lynn Curtis do? The main thing she does is, in 1979, fall of 79, she gets a starring role in the Glenn Larson program called The Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo. This was a spin-off of another Glenn Larson show called BJ and the Bear. You may remember the sound of those titles of some of those shows. And Sheriff Lobo ran for just 2 seasons, from 79 to, to 81. And she was on there, coming out as a role on there as well. That's pretty much most of what she did as far as acting. But the next thing she did is primarily what she is known for in the end. From 1982 to 2008, that's right, for 26 years, Janet Lynn Curtis was also known as Mrs. Glenn Larson. That's right. Glenn Larson marries Janet Lynn Curtis in 1982. They go on to have 2 children together. He had already had 3 children. Remember the Larson kids, the little blonde-haired kids in the episode Greetings from Earth? Those were Glenn Larson's children at the time from his first wife. But he marries Janet Lynn Curtis in 1982. They have 2 children. Unfortunately, their marriage comes to an end in 2008. But that is... who knew, right? Glenn Larson married one of the female Viper pilots. So we should all be so lucky. But that's Janet Lynn Curtis, right? So there you go, right? Who would have thought about that, right? Now, the next young lady Viper pilot is this lovely young lady here. Leanne Hunley is her name. She was one of my favorites, by the way. She, interestingly enough, also in 1979, gets a role on The Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo. So that's, yeah, kind of interesting. So if you want to see Janet Lynn Curtis and Leanne Hunley, I guess, search out episodes of Sheriff Lobo, and you'll get to see it. The show was kind of like it was kind of like a Dukes of Hazzard style, car chases and crashes and all this kind of stuff. Dukes of Hazzard had just premiered, by the way, in January of '79. So that kind of genre, the police, kind of bumbling police, and this and that was pretty, up there at that time in 1979. So that's what Sheriff Lobo was. But anyway, Leanne Hunley comes out in that as well. Not only that, but maybe her greatest claim to fame is that from 1982 to 1986, she gets a starring role in the soap opera Days of Our Lives. And believe it or not, in 1986, Leanne Hunley wins a Soap Opera Digest Award for her role on Days of Our Lives, and she wins the Daytime Emmy for her role in 1986 as well. So Leanne Hunley is an award-winning actress. Did you know that? We didn't even know that, right? Later on in the late 80s, she stars in the primetime soap opera Dynasty. We all remember that show. Where in 1989, she also wins a Soap Opera Digest Award for her role there. So she's amazing, I'm telling you. And then throughout the 80s, throughout the 90s, you probably have any show, and Leanne Hunley probably was on it. I mean, just look her up and look at her acting credits. I mean, everything. She was guest starring in all kinds of shows. Probably out of the 5 that we're profiling here, she has the longest list of acting credits. And believe it or not, as of 2017 and forward, she is reprising her role on from the Days of Our Lives soap opera on the Peacock. It's a streaming-only show now. It's called Days of Our Lives Beyond Salem. And she's still doing it. So that is awesome. She is still out there acting in that role. Okay, the next young lady that we see is this one right here. Gay Thomas is her name. Now, Gay Thomas, kind of interesting with a couple of these. They were either seen in the locker room scene, the G Suite scene, or they were just seen in the Vipers later in the battles. Now, Gay Thomas is one of these. She was prominently seen. There was a nice reaction shot of her and Janet Lynn Curtis after Serena tells Apollo, she loves him and embarrasses him. You can see Gay Thomas right there. And she reacts, kind of has a smile, whatever. But she's seen in the locker room scene, but she is not seen in the Vipers later. Okay, so just to kind of give you an idea. Gay Thomas studied acting a little bit, but primarily did modeling. That was where she came, kind of like Maren Jensen in the early days. She did some guest roles in several shows around at that time, but pretty much not after that. She kind of got out of acting at that point. And to this very day, she's now a personal development and business strategist coach, and very successful in her own right. So there she is. She now goes by the name Gay Thomas Wilson, by the way. So another one of the female warriors. There you go. The next one is this young lady. Now, we only have pictures of her. This is Millicent Crisp. And she was one of the ones who, interestingly enough, she was not in the locker room scene, but she is seen in the Vipers. And interestingly enough, even more interesting, she was shown shooting a Cylon Raider. That's right. In the first battle at the asteroid, she actually scores a kill on a Cylon Raider. And she's, she smiles and all that. No lines again, but she actually gets a kill on screen. She eventually became a writer and producer, also didn't really follow up into acting. Worked for Warner Brothers, the Knight Ridder Media, company, Polygram Records, and she's had a successful career kind of behind the scenes to this day, right? Very successful. And again, I encourage you to look them up, and if you want to do more research on these lovely ladies, they have each gone on to some great things. And so that's Millicent Crisp, and the last one who was credited on the show is Jennifer Joseph. You can see her here in this picture standing next to Dirk Benedict and Leanne Hunley in the locker room scene. I don't believe she was seen in the Vipers, however. She starred in an episode of Incredible Hulk shortly afterward, and a short film called The Hands of Ida. But apparently that is all we have for Jennifer Joseph. I try to look up more for her. She is listed on IMDb and that kind of stuff, but really nothing there other than her appearance on Battlestar Galactica and maybe Incredible Hulk. And one interesting thing about Jennifer Joseph is the fact that in the episode The Man with 9 Lives, she's also shown very briefly in that episode as a shuttle pilot. They were taking the Warriors to the Rising Star and back and that kind of stuff. And she's seen very briefly as a shuttle pilot, although she was uncredited in that episode. And so, unfortunately, the trail is dried up on Jennifer Joseph. Nothing too much as of what she's doing today. But anyway, as we come back here now, so there you go. 5 profiles of these lovely young ladies who played female Colonial Warriors, those famous female warriors in the Lost Planet of the Gods. And like I said, in that G-suit locker room scene, there was about 4 others. You can see them in the background. You can also see them in other areas, like down on Kobol, like running around when the Cylons are blowing it up. But they are not credited. They are uncredited. So we do not know who they are. But there was about 3 or 4 more that were in that scene, but we don't know who they are. But these are the ones, the actresses who were actually credited, but had no speaking lines. And we will get to a few others later on who do have speaking lines. You probably know who I'm talking about, right? Like Deetra and Bree. Those are the other 2 main ones. But they were, credited up front. They had a much bigger role, and they have, of course, speaking lines to everything. So we'll get to them eventually coming up soon here. But anyway, hope you like this one. The Female Warriors of Battlestar Galactica. Long live Battlestar Galactica. And I'll see you in the next video.